Right. Welcome, everyone. Let me pin my video. That would help. So welcome. You know, when I sent out the email this morning about, excuse me, talking about one of the greatest hypnotic speeches, you know, because I was thinking about this, believe it or not, and because it started something I read over the weekend. Someone sent out, and they're just, and I made the same mistake. I'll always preface that, where they sent out, and it's an old study where and people still use it, and it said like only 7% of your communication is the words that you use. And the original one says something like 50-something% of your communication is nonverbal. And it goes down this list, and it went around for a long time. I used it. A lot of people used it. Guess what? That's crap. That is not true, right? Even the guy that came out with the study goes, no, that's not what you guys misinterpreted everything I meant by this thing, right? Because even when I would read that, I'm like, there's something wrong here. If words don't matter that much, if it's all this other stuff, how do certain speeches last through time? Right? And even just listening to them, yes, you still get the vocal inflections and the timing and all of this, right? But if you're just listening and it can inspire you or move you whatever way the speaker was trying to do, without seeing the person, so you don't know what their body language is, right? So yes, words do matter, which is a direct pitch for my hypnotic writing course, because the words you use do matter. But since today is Martin Luther King Day in the United States, in the beautiful United States of America, with the exception, I think, unless they changed it, Arizona is the only state that doesn't celebrate. But anyway, it's the famous Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech. Well, first of all, again, how things become generalized in culture. The speech is actually a lot longer. If you go look it up, it's a lot longer than the part that we think of. "I have a dream." That's at the very end, right? But if you go down and you look at the speech, it's very hypnotic in the way that it's written. And how can we use that, right? Well, again, a lot of times, especially hypnotists, NLPers, even some personal coaches trained in this, for some reason, we have a little bit of a hesitation to use our skills when it comes to communication to the general public. You'll use your hypnosis or NLP skills greatly when you're coaching someone, or when you're trying to get someone ready for maybe a performance or a certain thing, but do you use it just in general, right? And yet, when you look at things that last through time, they're very hypnotic, right? They're very hypnotic, right? And the "I Have a Dream" speech, I'm going to drop to the bottom, the part we know, where it's, let it, and it's really, and everybody overlooks this. First of all, they think it starts with "I have a dream," right? He does a nice setup with a contrast, right? "Let us not wallow in the valley of despair," right? Which is setting you up for, how many people want to be in the valley of despair? And then he says, "I say to you, my friends," right? That very political, all politicians say that, but it's very powerful, "my friends," right? And then he doubles down on a little bit of the negative, which is, even though we face difficulties of today and tomorrow, so today where you're at right now, we have difficulties. It's also future pacing. We may have difficulties, right? This is where he goes, "I still have a dream." It's a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. 3 times in one sentence, he uses the term dream. What is a dream? Right? So when you hear that word, what is a dream? For most people, dreams are pleasant, right? Dreams are pleasant because you've seen, if it's not, we call it a nightmare, right? And so it was very structured. And by saying that, I have a dream, I still have a dream. It's a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. It ties in two things: dream generally, right? And what's the American dream that most of us in this country have been taught since birth? All men are created equal. I mean, in theory, it sounds good. I don't know if the country lives up to that, obviously, even though it's been 50, 60 years since this speech. But, when you hear the word dream, it sets your mind into a pleasant state. And then he uses the word dream, I think around 10 to 12 times just in the end of this, right? And those of us trained in hypnosis and NLP, and I'm guilty of not doing this enough, which is called compounding, right? You don't say a suggestion once, you say it over and over again, right? As, Diamond Diller would say, if you get a post that works or an ad that works, it's why they run it over and over again. It's compounding, right? We'll post, which is great. Maybe it gets attention, but do you compound it? Do you post it again? Do you post again at a different time because of the nature of social media? If you see it in the morning, that's great. But what if you're not online in the morning? So you need to repost it. But about the dream, right? And again, he uses the term dream, which sets the preface up beautifully to the group he's talking to, and he uses very sensory-based language, right? The state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, right? And most of us have been in a situation where it's red. I live in Florida, shit happens all the time. It's sweltering, right? And you know what that's like? It's uncomfortable, right? And I think he was brilliant in two ways. A, he's tagging into the to the target market, African Americans who have suffered the sweltering pain of injustice and oppression, right? But also tags into everyone else that maybe has never felt the injustice or the oppression, but we know what it's like to be uncomfortable, right? So again, it's like it's funneling down, right? And just think about the power of that. And again, he keeps repeating dream, right? And he talks about it transforming, going from the negative, the sweltering heat of oppression and injustice, into the oasis of freedom and justice, right? And if I remember right, if you watch the cameras there, and again, it wasn't set up to really tape it that way, but he's using different movements as he's talking, right? And again, when you fast forward a few decades, you see the good communicators have learned from this, right? The Bill Clintons, the Barack Obamas, right? On how to use the motions, right? And setting that contrast between where people may be to where they want to be. And I have a dream that we can arc through that, right? And then he uses really good analogy about children, because we all hope for, as Kennedy said, a better, we all want the same thing, a better life for our children. That's the universal across pretty much every culture, right? And he brings that up. So if you're watching, you're having a dream, you're like, be nice to move from the uncomfortable to the comfortable, and where little black children from Mississippi can join hands with little white children from wherever and bring together, right? So again, and he keeps mentioning dreams, that the dreams will be exalted from every hilltop, mountain. I mean, it's beautiful analogy. It's very hypnotic, right? And of course, he was a Southern Baptist preacher, which has been known to use very hypnotic language. And if you go back and you listen to the speech, not just the words, but his delivery is very hypnotic. right? And it takes you to where you want to go, right? And then he uses the words like, it's our hope. And we all know what it's like to have hope. And and the very structure of our hope, which is, making my hope your hope, right? And he talks about struggling together. That we're not in this alone. The idea of struggling, we all want to struggle together. I mean, when there's bad times, you want to be in a group. That's in your DNA, right? As much as some people in the hypnosis world want to make fun of the 12-step movement, they don't understand that. You don't want to go through this alone. Whether it's alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, whatever the addiction happens to be, you want to struggle together with a group that's been there, right? It's the strength of, the brotherhood of what happens in the military. You struggle together to get to the end result, right? And then toward the end, he starts segueing or transitioning to the words of freedom. We'll stand for freedom together. Free one day. And again, he keeps using dream, and he still uses the analogy of all of God's children. Right? We all like to think of ourselves as God's children. Right? And so it's like an interesting thing, right? And then he does the about, my country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. And he does it with his voice, right? Of thee I sing, land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountain side, and he takes a pause, if I remember right. Let freedom ring. And he overlooks the audience. If you're entranced by this point, ladies and gentlemen, and I remember, I think it was some of the people on the other side of the aisle that didn't like his thinking, admitted this was probably the most moving speech they'd ever heard. Right? And it scared them. Right? And then he talks about let freedom ring, and he repeats that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. Is that hypnotic? And then he ties it with different commands. From the hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring from the mountains of New York, the Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, right? Let freedom ring from the Rockies. He goes through and he's engulfing the country, right? So he's doing the compounding of the beginning of the section, let freedom ring, and he's bringing more and more people in, right? So, Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. And then he does a very cool hypnotic command. And when this happens, not if, when. Very hypnotic. Don't we use that when you're writing a script, or if you're using a script? When this happens, that happens, right? Whether you want to do a hypnotic, connection, but he's future pacing when this happens, which is presupposing it's going to happen. And again, he brings in God's children. And then he incorporates everyone at the end, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics. We'll all be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last. Free at last. Thank God Almighty. We're free at last. I used to go to a fundamentalist church, so I heard that thousands of times when I grew up, right? But if you think about it, right, it's the compounding, right? And then when you look at other speeches that do the same thing, they're very hypnotic in the way they're written, whether they're long like this one was, because there's several pages before we get to the part that we generally think of. Even something like, the Gettysburg Address, when you really read it, it's very hypnotic. 7 years ago. Sets time in your head. Our fathers, which is, it's not, he's in court when Lincoln did it. They weren't trained in this, but they were good at it. It's like we're all children of the same father. Our fathers brought forth. Not just my father, your father. It's brilliant stuff. But on the beautiful Martin Luther King Day, I thought it would be good to kind of break down that speech a little bit anyway, and have some fun with it. So again, it's the hypnotic command. It's the compounding, right? It's placing imagery in your head, sweltering heat, which ties a physical uncomfortableness with a more esoteric one, like injustice. We all know what it's like to be in heat, but oppression or injustice, right? So he's linking all these things together, right? And again, it's the compounding, and it's the language patterns that he used. And again, he was a very good minister before he went into the world of what he was in, which he still stayed a minister of is it the Ebenezer Baptist Church? Anybody know? I think that's it, right? In Atlanta, Georgia, right? And so just, do we do that with our language? Do we do that with what we're beginning to think about, whether all our communication? Okay? Because again, I think sometimes we shut off that part of our minds, hypnotic, NLP, subconscious communication, when, excuse me, when we're just generally giving a talk, giving a speech, giving a communication, maybe if you're doing a Facebook Live or a TikTok video, I always teach what I need to remind myself. So now when I get ready to do my little 1-minute Instagrams or TikToks, that to remember to think this through a little bit. Am I compounding? Am I doing the things we're talking about? And again, in the current world, the other reason you want to compound, some social media guy was talking about, let's say you do even a 1-minute TikTok video, right? You need to repeat it, whatever your message is, basically 3 times within that 1 minute, right? Why? They may not watch the whole video, right? And the way the scroll comes up, it may, for some reason, kick it 15 or 20 seconds into it. Right. And so, it's like we want to use these skills all the time. So again, if you want now for the sales pitch now, so if you want to learn more about this, we're doing hypnotic marketing or hypnotic writing and over the top marketing 2.0. It's coming up in a week, less than a week, the 21st of January, as part of my hypnotic selling protocols I'm putting together. So we're having fun with that. So we're doing hypnotic marketing, hypnotic writing and over the top marketing. The next class will be unstoppable hypnotic sales confidence, using hypnosis and NLP in the sales process with confidence, things like that. So I'm developing a protocol with that. So we're going to have a lot of fun with it. So if you have any questions, just direct message me or click on the link below and we'll talk soon.